good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in. Anumodana, I rejoice in people joining the online retreat, practicing at home. Ajahn Anan is very kind, doing these several times a year. I'm sure you're finding it very helpful. Ajahn asked me to contribute. I'm very honored, happy to do so. I hope that something I will be able to share might be helpful. I wanted to talk today, focus upon predominantly the first two of the five spiritual powers, faith and energy, and how that then can translate into effort. So, we all have faith in Lord Buddha. We all have faith in his teaching. We all have faith in the practices, the Dhamma and Vinaya, the teaching and the training. Sometimes this faith can be a little bit heady, and it's good if our faith is balanced, if it's based in reason, sound reason. I wanted to talk about faith, and I mentioned that most of us, all of us, in fact, if you're joining a retreat, putting forth effort into joining the chanting, listening to the Dhamma talk, contemplating what is said, meditating, keeping a schedule as much as you can. Obviously, everybody has a certain amount of faith in the value of the practice. Sometimes, for some people, the faith can be quite heady, intellectual, and for other people, there can be a lot of heart-based faith, sense of devotion, loving devotion, and it's not necessarily manifesting as a intelligent, skillful practice. So faith is an important subject to contemplate, and we're aiming for a rational, sound faith based in reason, which then also connects to the heart, and when it does, when we have great confidence, a lot of energy arises. Human beings have this remarkable faith faculty that when emboldened, nourished, becomes the faith power, the sattha bala. So I just wanted to talk at first about a couple of wonderful practitioners that I had the chance to meet as a junior monk. Like many junior monks, we would read the biographies, the great biographies that were translated in English at the library. That might be Lumpur Tate or Lumpur Lee Damadaro, or Lumpur Man. And then there was a period of time when I was a Majjhima monk that I wanted to, any great monks in Thailand, if I had the chance to pay respects to them, I wanted to pay respects to them. And so there was one monk who I'd heard about, Lumpur Uttama, and he lived at a province called Sanklaburi on the border of Burma. And the reason I wanted to pay respects to him is, actually there were two reasons. I heard that he had really good mala beads that he blessed, and I wanted a set. But the other reason was I heard that he had walked to India and back, and I wanted to just simply pay respects to him and ask him, is that true? So I did go and pay respects to Lumpur Uttama, and at the time he was in his late 90s, I believe. And he confirmed that with a heart of faith, he had walked through Burma and probably what is parts of Bangladesh, down into India, paid respects in Bodh Gaya, and then had walked back. And similarly, there was another monk I had the good fortune to pay respects here actually at Wat Map Jan, a monk called Lumpur Supha. And Lumpur Supha was even more impressive. Lumpur Supha had walked from Thailand to India. After he'd paid respects at the holy sites in India, he walked on to Afghanistan. For those people who sometimes read the Jataka tales, it often says that Bodhisattva spent lives in Taxila, sometimes in Banaras, sometimes in Taxila. So Lumpur Supha wanted to see Taxila, was the center of the learning during the Gandhara period. Buddhism was very great and flourished for many centuries in the Afghanistan-Pakistan area. When he'd paid respects, when he'd visited Taxila, on his way back he stopped off at Shaolin in China, and apparently there were still some great masters practicing in Shaolin, and then he walked back to Thailand. So it's just amazing, isn't it? Not getting in any car, and also he had an interesting adjunct to his already impressive story. At one point he was half swallowed by a python. He woke up and a python had swallowed him up to his waist. And he said to the python, "Okay, if you can ensure my being established in Nibbana, go ahead and swallow me. But if you can't ensure my going to Nibbana, you better spit me out." And the snake spat him out. But what comes to mind, what I wanted to pay respects for, is what is possible when a person's faith is truly, truly, deeply well established. How much energy that gives rise to, and then how much effort is possible. So recently I was reading a biography of Master Shuyun, Empty Cloud, great meditation master of the Chan tradition. And similarly, he did a pilgrimage on foot to the 4 holy mountains of China. And when he got to the base of Wutai San, which the peak of Wutai San is 3,000 meters, he did actually not from the base, from thousands of kilometers away, he did a 3 steps, 1 bow practice all the way to the base of Wutai San. And then he did 3 steps, 1 bow up the mountain. And the whole time he was holding an incense stick. So he would hold his incense stick, 3 steps, 1 bow. And maybe after about an hour, the incense stick goes out, he lights another one. Thousands of kilometers. I believe that pilgrimage to Wutai San took him about 2.5 years. I remember reading in the biography that there were several things going on in Shuyun's mind. One was that his mother had passed away at his birth, shortly after his birth. And his father, who hadn't been particularly supportive of him becoming a monk, Shuyun had kind of run away and gone forth without the blessing of his father, and then hid from his father. And so he felt some remorse. He wanted to make a very great and vast merit and then dedicate that to his parents. Reading these things as a young monk and meeting some of these great practitioners and paying respects, I wanted to emulate these things to some degree, according to my ability, according to my effort, which was not anywhere near as established or powerful as those bhikkhus. But I think sometimes if we compare ourselves to these great practitioners in negative light, some people don't want to read these things because it seems so far away, and we can get into a bit of dejection, can be a bit depressing. How come these great practitioners can do such a thing, where my own practice I struggle so much? And this isn't yoniso manasikara, this isn't wise reflection, that is yoniso manasikara, unskillful reflection. We do need to consider the example of such practitioners, but we need to also understand it's a multi-lifetime process, and this is the result when people cultivate their faith and their energy and get skilled at translating that faith and energy into practice. We hold these practitioners up as an example of this is what is possible. For people born in the human form who meet the Buddha's teachings, this is what is actually possible. If one has faith, if one's faith is strong enough, powerful enough. Ajahn Anan, when he came to practice here at Wat Mapjan, actually before that, I mentioned when Ajahn Anan was practicing at Wat Nompapong, like many Asian practitioners, there was some fear of ghosts. But because Lumpur Anan had great faith in his teacher Ajahn Chah and great faith in the practice, he did go and practice in the part of Wat Nompapong that is a charnel ground, an area where they had been burning bodies and leaving bodies, corpses for centuries. So Lumpur Anan, Tan Anan at the time, went to practice in the Pacha, as they call in Thai. And Lumpur Cha, renowned for his abilities, wandered by early evening, and he probably would have known that it was Ajahn Anan, but he called out, "Hey, who's that over there in the glot, in the umbrella, under the umbrella?" And Ajahn Anan answered, "Anan Kap, Tan Anan Kap." And it gave him great courage, that knowing that his teacher was aware that he was practicing in the forest with the ghosts, he was able to continue practicing throughout the night. When Ajahn Anan came to this monastery, Wat Mapjan, many years ago, they soon discovered that there was a lot of malaria. And I believe that Ajahn Anan actually had malaria 5 times in the first decade or so. And I asked him, "Why didn't you leave when you realized that it was such a malaria-infested forest and that you were constantly getting sick and this chronic illness will be affecting your health in a bad way with some long-term consequences? Why didn't you leave?" And he said 2 things. He said, well, first, the lay people had offered the land with great faith, and he had accepted it for the sake of building a monastery, so he felt he should stay. Second, he also said that his practice was established enough so that during that time he developed great insight and deepened his practice. And this is the thing about when one's spiritual powers are established, becoming truly powerful, it becomes possible to take the challenges and the obstacles as the path. So with malaria, as you can imagine, headaches, shaking, shivers, hot fevers, cold fevers, sleeplessness, deep sleep, exhaustion, all of these quite extreme changes in feeling. And Ajahn took that as his practice, and noticing arising and ceasing, changing, was having quite profound insights into the not self nature of the body phenomenon. So he said he learnt a lot throughout all these illnesses, and obviously developed more patient endurance and determination, other parami. For myself, when I was 5 pansa monk, in those days it was a bit of a tradition that once you finish your 5th pansa you would go on a tudong, wandering through various areas. You're allowed to, after 5 years, ask your teacher, not under his dependence, trained. You can go around a bit on your own. So I wanted to do this largely as a gesture of honoring the tradition. There's an example in Lumpur Cha's biography where he'd heard of Lumpur Mun's reputation. He had some doubts. He wanted to see Lumpur Mun, and he walked all the way to Bangkok from Ubon Ratchathani. He got to Bangkok and he found that Lumpur Mun was no longer there. Lumpur Mun had gone back to Ubon. So Ajahn Chah walked back to Ubon. We have these examples of very, very sincere practitioners being willing to go to great effort to pay respects to teachers. And so in my generation, of course, well, there were already good roads, good cars, and much less forest. But I wanted to make a gesture of honoring the tradition of putting forth an effort to pay respects. So I did walk from Wat Pa Nanachat to Pratat Panom in Nakhon Phanom province, and then to the Museum of Lumpur Mun, where there are some relics in Sakon Nakhon. It was over 300 kilometers. And then a person helped me catch a bus, and I walked along the train tracks from Uttaradit to Chiang Mai and paid respects in Merim to a site where there are 4 footprints of 4 Buddhas, like Buddha Ba Si Loi. So that was a over 700 kilometer walking practice, and it was very difficult because it was mostly walking along roads where the forest had already been deforested, and it was hot, and but when you take on a more difficult practice, you learn things about your mind. So I did get a chest infection, I did get food poisoning and diarrhea, but one of the things I learned about my character was if I just did Buddho, my mind didn't become peaceful. But if I recited the names of the 5 Buddhas of this eon, made it just a little bit more personal. Namo Kakusondo Buddho, Namo Konagamano Buddho, Namo Kasapo Buddho, Namo Gotama Buddho, Namo Meitaya Buddho. My mind became rapturous and peaceful. It's like sometimes we have to step out of our normal situation and push things a little bit, and we learn something about ourselves. For myself, I needed to make the Buddha in those days a little bit more personal, a being who had come to this world and become enlightened, established a dispensation, led others to liberation. When I made it personal in that way, my mind felt very rapturous and happy. Another thing I learned about myself during that time was if I practice in a place where there are relics, in a chedi, near a chedi, even if that place was busy, for whatever reason, my mind became more peaceful than if I was meditating in an isolated forest. It's something that I wouldn't have learned about, wouldn't have known about myself had I not experimented a bit. Probably has something to do with the merit and the blessings in the relics and the devas who are coming to pay respects. Different people do have different character tendencies, and so that was helpful for me to learn about faith-based practices and devotional practice. So when we consider faith, it's just a little exploration now. I'll ask you some questions, and in most cases the answer will be yes, but just to kind of explore, challenge, investigate. Do you have faith that Lord Buddha realized Nibbana? Do you really have faith that the Buddha realized Nibbana? Probably most people do. Do you realize that Nibbana exists then? Is there such a thing as Nibbana? The deathless, the unconditioned. Sometimes it's good to consider what the goal actually is and ask yourself, do you have faith in the goal? Is it real in your heart? Is it real yet? Nibbana as a aspiration something that can be realized. Another question, do you have faith that other people besides Buddhas can realize Nibbana? Probably you do. I do. We have the great disciples, the great bhikkhus, the great bhikkhunis, foremost in wisdom, foremost in psychic powers, foremost in teaching, expounding short verses, foremost in condensing long teachings, foremost in the divine eye, etc. Do you have faith that since the time of the Buddha there has been an unbroken lineage of enlightened disciples? Do you have faith that there are still enlightened beings in this day and age? Sometimes when we make this exploration, we just ask ourselves, and that feeling is, yeah, I do. I have faith in the Buddha. Yeah, I do have faith in Nibbana. Yeah, I do have faith in the great disciples. Yeah, I do have faith that people have still accomplished this in the current era. It gives a feeling of courage. It gives a feeling of joy. It gives a feeling of optimism. Very importantly, do you have faith that you can realize this? Sometimes we put forth the effort, we get on the pillow, we do the chanting, but there's something inside us which is like, I can't do this. We need to have a look at that. If that does come up, then that actually needs to be challenged, because Nibbana is an impersonal phenomenon. Nibbana doesn't exclude, it's not the fact that someone guarding Nibbana that only lets in the ones that they like. Nibbana is the result of letting go of ignorance and delusion and attachment. And anybody who practices the Eightfold Path can do that. So when you ask yourself, do I have faith that this is an achievable goal for this body-mind continuum? I hope the answer is yes. And if it's not, dig a bit deeper. Challenge the doubt. Make some kind of affirmation. I believe that would be helpful. We have to start with the conventional self that still has suffering, affected by greed, hatred, and delusion. That's the starting point. Patujana, worldly being, deluded being. As we keep our precepts, do our practice, we become the Kalyana Jana, the lovely being. And the Kalyana Jana is the foundation for what becomes the Arya Jana, the noble being, enlightened being, sages. So all of you keeping precepts, meditating, having faith, chanting, listening to Dhamma talks, you are lovely beings. And so you do have the potential. It's simply a matter of laying the causes consistently. And so with regards to emboldening, establishing, nourishing, lifting up our faith like this, that should give rise to a lovely sense of energy, mental quality of energy, inspiration. Now that has to then translate into effort, and the best type of effort, and this is probably one of the hardest things, the best type of effort is a consistent effort. So it's very, very important that we don't just practice when we have a chance to do a retreat, someone's giving Dhamma talks, someone's leading some chanting, now I can tap into that, do some practice. After the retreat, and so we don't compare ourselves to Lumpur Supa walking all the way to India, Afghanistan, China and back and say, I can't do that. The skillful reflection is to think, this is what people with faith and energy are capable of doing, so I'm going to increase my sitting from half an hour to 45 minutes. If Shi Yun can walk to all four of the holy mountains and to India and back, I can walk Jongkrom for 15 minutes. We hold these people up as examples. If they can do that much, I can do this much. When we are consistent in our practice, then the other factors, the other powers, we have faith, energy, mindfulness. So when we practice formal meditation, we're clarifying our mindfulness, we're making our mindfulness sharper. When we do it with consistency, the power of the mindfulness gets better over a period of years. If we don't do it consistently, we might kind of feel like nothing's happening, we're not improving. This is a direct result of not being consistent. When we practice, the Eightfold Path is turning around in our hearts, destroying ignorance and delusion and craving. When we don't practice, ignorance and delusion and craving comes back in. One step forward, one step back. The only way to develop in this path is one step forward, one step forward, one step forward. And if those are only small steps, that's okay. If you do go back one step, you quickly step forward another step. Going forward 3 steps, stepping back 1 is okay. Still going forward. But going forward 1 and stepping back 1 isn't. You're never going to get anywhere. So we have to, our faith has to translate as energy and then other certain beautiful qualities that can come from this is resolve, conviction. Because I have faith, because I have this extraordinary potential, because I want to honor this potential, I am deeply committed, I commit wholeheartedly, I am going to do this. Then there's energy, then there's resolve, then there's conviction, then you do it. Shi Yun can walk to India and back from Eastern China. I can walk Jongkrom for half an hour a day. I can, and I will. Luang Por Chah's famous teaching, if you want to succeed in practice, when you're diligent, when you're peaceful, you do it. When you're lazy, when you're not peaceful, you do it. When you want to do it, you do it. When you don't want to do it, you do it. Sadhu. That's how one is successful in practice. Oftentimes we're very attached. We have a not very long attention span. We want fast results. We think if we sit and the mind isn't peaceful, it's useless. That's not true. It's through sitting consistently that you develop insights about mind states. This is what a lazy mind state feels like. This is what a sleepy mind state feels like. This is what a dull mind state feels like. This is what an inspired mind state feels like. This is what energy, rapture, tranquility, and peace feels like. And you notice them all arising and ceasing and changing. And when we have a commitment to practice, sometimes we feel, oh, I'm too tired, I couldn't be bothered. You come and sit, after 5 minutes, you're peaceful. Sometimes you think, oh, I'm really inspired, I'm going to go and practice. You sit there and you can't stop thinking. It's really not sure. But if we're consistent, what we notice is that it changes over time and it's not self. And we develop skills. What do you do when the mind's dull? What do you do when there's resistance? Learn how to do these anusatis, recollect the Buddha, recollect the Dhamma, recollect the Sangha, our favorite teachings, our favorite practitioners, brighten the mind. What do you do when the mind becomes peaceful easily? Rest in the peacefulness, deepen the peacefulness, establish the peacefulness. When we are consistent in our effort and consistent in establishing a good quality of mindfulness, that's when Samma Samadhi is more likely to arise. This is an emphasis on Luang Por Chah's teaching, being consistent with our practice, formal practice, but then also being determined to be mindful throughout all postures, all activities. This is what actually makes it possible for the mind to become gathered and collected. You'll start to experience more samadhi. Initially, Khanika Samadhi, peaceful for a minute or so, and then Upajjhara Samadhi, peaceful 10, 15, 20 minutes. Eventually, Appana Samadhi, where peace becomes the object, there are no hindrances. The last of the powers is the panya, the wisdom. With some clear, consistent mindfulness, noticing the way mind states arise and cease, it becomes kind of obvious. It's not self. There's no permanent, unchanging me or I or mine there. Consistent mindfulness notices that. If there's some samadhi as well as a consistent mindfulness, that functioning together, sati, samadhi and panya, you have vipassana jnana, insights on a deeper level where you may have the experience of the sense of self falling away, have an experience of emptiness. There's still that which knows, there's still a body, but the mind is empty, no feeling of self. Awareness that knows emptiness. Ajahn Anan sometimes explains when we see anicca, dukkha, anatta, the experience of the mind is sunyata. In seeing anicca, anatta, the mind lets go, awareness that knows emptiness. The mind can be vast like the sky, no grasping, no sense of self, no future, no past, no I, no me that, no others, and tremendous peace. When sati, samadhi and panya work together, these kind of insights, and Ajahn sometimes talks about temporary liberations, where ignorance and delusion falls away from the mind, clarity, peacefulness, awareness that knows emptiness. The mind experiences this for periods of time, and then what this does is it emboldens the faith even more. It's true. This practice works. Nibbana is real. Anybody who practices sati, samadhi and panya will experience insight and periods of liberation and eventually complete liberation. So I rejoice in your practice, and I hope our exploration of faith and these stories, these encouragements may have been helpful to you. I hope that you have great faith, great energy, great effort, great mindfulness, great concentration, great wisdom, and that this may lead you to the cessation of every type of suffering. May we all grow in Dhamma.